I'm pretty sure we'd probably be like, wow, that's why you are the way you are, right? Like, because there's a lot of things I'm sure you growing up with your parents, you're like, I wonder why he acts like that. I wonder why she acts like that. And it's like, when that unknown is scary because you're like, it's almost like if you find out you have a mental health issue, then you're like, and then you go back and look and you go, oh, okay, yeah, why didn't he get help? And then you realize like there wasn't help for like our parents.
Or they just, like I said,
they couldn't afford it or whatever.
They didn't know about it.
It wasn't normalized, right? And then and so it's kind of cool and it's kind of interesting through you. I learn about the fact that we always talk about the diaspora of like African Americans, right, and the Great Migrations and the saltwater slavery and the triangle, but then you realize like Puerto Ricans have that same thing. Like it's like leave the island, go to wherever you go, maybe come back, maybe don't. Then you set foot here and you have family here, and even though you have family on the island, you're gone for 10 years. So it's not cheap to just go back. Even if you have a place to stay, it's still not cheap for you got 4 people on a plane. That's
or like in the past. I think a lot of Puerto Ricans would go to New York. That's where most of them went. Or I found out from my dad, they'd go to Philadelphia too. But now you've got Puerto Ricans in Hawaii, in California, so I have family in California. Yeah. I have family in Florida. I have family in...
Well, because we think of Puerto Ricans as the 3.5 million people that occupy Puerto Rico, but we don't
there
realize...
are more Puerto Ricans outside
we don't
of Puerto
realize
Rico.
The 7-8 million that have gone...
And spread around the world,
and it's kind of interesting, because what's cool is you shared a story with me about like what's funny is it's interesting. You grew up in Brooklyn, right? I wish Coach Barry was here. He grew up in Queens. Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking to him about his experience growing up in Queens, it's where he lived. He talks about the drugs, like the Supreme Team, the violence, but also like not even knowing sometimes that you're poor. You grow up on this block. This is your block, right? And it's like it's huge. And then you go back and it's like, why was I impressed with this little like territory and area that I grew up on because everything was there. Yeah. But it's like talking to him, and it's interesting how you and I could relate. I could relate to him. Mm-hmm. I could relate to one of my best friends moved from Poland when he was 5. So I could, like, him and I are best friends, my other best friends. It's like when you look at it, but it's amazing to see that I think even for me, I learn a lot because, you're naive until you know. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of interesting to hear perspectives.
The cool thing, like you're saying, is that, you do have your differences with people, but if you look, like you said, you find, the commonalities that it's like, although, your friend... was born in Poland, moved here at 5, that there's still... Basketball brought us together, and then we became great friends. It's like, I look at all these things... Or talking about Brooklyn, and you're like, you had similar experiences here in Merida.
Yeah, or like Brooklyn, I'm like, I went to Brooklyn once, I'll never go back. It's very dangerous. Like it's like, because you're like, they rob people there. Like, they rob people everywhere. Yeah, but there... It's a lifestyle. Like it's like, and then you hear you hear the hip hop songs, but then you go there and you're like, no, it's not that bad. Like, it's like, I didn't get robbed, right? And so kind of, and then you meet people in Brooklyn, they were like, well, you probably didn't walk down this street. And I'm like, no, I was on St. Nicholas. I know, I was on St. Nicholas. They looked at me different. They're like, why is this white boy here? But it's interesting because I remember telling you the story. I went to Brooklyn. I had a good time. But I was like, yeah, it just doesn't feel like home to me. Like, I always liked the Bronx. The Bronx was like the Bronx. I don't know why the Bronx and Harlem were like... Mm-hmm. Maybe it was just easy on, easy off access for somebody from Connecticut, but I like the Bronx. When I went to Queens, it's like trying to get back on the highway. There's like one entrance and exit, and like the sign that says like 95 North is like covered with like shrubs and bushes, so you can't find it. And then it's like you just circle around. It's circle around. You're like, man, I can't. This is not conducive. Like, if I got to get off of here and get out quick, like I can't be like. I remember going to Queensbridge once. And just being like, all these buildings, and then you're like, oh, this is why, like, there's like 20,000 people living in this small building complex.
Well, and the thing is, like, growing up in Brooklyn, my parents didn't have a car, but we didn't need a car. The M train was just like a block away, you could take the bus. That was just like a block away also. But like as a kid, the neighborhood did seem a lot bigger because we walked everywhere.
Yeah.
And so
you're much healthier too.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that now driving through my neighborhood, it seems so small because I'm in a car and you get from one place to another in a minute.
Or the traffic light's taking too long. You're like, hurry up. You don't even get to see like.
Oh yeah, you don't notice all that. But the funny thing is, going back to that neighborhood, it's changed a lot. And we talked
gentrified?
About yeah. We talked about that Saturday Night Live skit with Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
And
I got to walk these dogs.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm meeting with this person, like for bicycling or whatever, or like, and it has changed a lot. It's not the same neighborhood. I mean, and I like going to just because there are certain, aspects that have stayed the same, but you got to look for them. And it's funny because my friend, he just moved out of Bushwick, I want to say like 2 years ago. And he just went back to Knickerbocker Avenue. And he's like, man, Knickerbocker's changed a lot. And I was like, dude, I've been telling you that for like the last 20 years.
So do you get out of your house?
Yeah. But, he's like, this store closed and this store closed. And now they got this shop and it's all weird.
Got a Starbucks. Yeah. Listen, that's the crazy. Like we talk about, so to close out this piece, we talk about equity. We talk about being a teacher dad, right? But it's like when you look at simple things like the word equity, people just assume equity is equality, and it's not, right? And I look at like even simple things like you grew up not having much. Even though I had two parents, you had two parents, we grew up, we didn't have a lot. It was paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. There was some my parents, my grandparents shielded us from there was a lot of dark days and nights where it's like the heater turns off and you're like, it's cold. Just put an extra blanket on. It's like you walk downstairs, the stove's open. Mm-hmm. You look in the cupboard and you move the milk to the side, hoping that something else is. I see jelly, but there's no peanut butter. And then you got peanut butter and jelly, but you ran out of bread, or you smell the milk and you're like, we need milk. When I get paid, it's like when you get paid next week, you're like, what?
The milk smells funny, and it's like, no, it's still good. It's like, pour it in your cereal and you're eating it, and it's like,
and you're like, nah, something's off. But
it's mom. But you're gonna get beat if you throw that away, so you have to eat that.
It happened to me the other day. It was funny. I went and got Life cereal, cinnamon Life cereal. I don't know why I like it. My wife, she's like, you're weird. You go from Lucky Charms to Life cereal. I'm like, I wanted Life, so I pour it in. And I go and open, I didn't think. I'm like, we got this milk like 5 days ago. So I pour the milk in, and I taste it, and it's got like a sharp taste to it. And I'm like,
a little tanginess.
Yeah. so I smell it, and I go, wait a minute, what the hell? So I start pouring the milk out, and you hear, and like these little chunks, and you're like, so I'm like, I just opened the cereal. We don't got money for this. So I started hearing like my father, we don't got money for that. Don't waste that cereal. It's almost like when Friday, put some water in it, right? Like it's like, and so I felt guilty throwing it out. And then I looked, and somebody must have, when they opened up the, how there's that tab, somebody must have like putting stuff away hastily. They must have hit like the button and turned it to like not the colder side, the cooler side. So if you have stuff, like the top is still going to be good. But because I kept on saying like, why is this juice not like, it's not ice cold? I like ice cold juice. Why is this? And I'm like, oh man. And then my son Isaiah comes downstairs and he goes, does that mean the chocolate milk's bad too? Because we bought chocolate milk, and he was like, who would waste this? And I'm going to say, it was probably you putting your damn food on the top shelf where that's not where it goes. That's where the butter, the eggs, you're like, and so it's funny because remember outside we were talking about like, I started to hear my father like, it's $5, that's $6. We don't have my,
No, just the other day, who's leaving all these lights on? Why are all these lights on?
You want to pay for, want to pay for your cell phone bill? We can leave the lights on, but you're going to pay for all your stuff. So it's just interesting, but it's amazing when you look at the makeup of our society, and you realize like the benefits of equity. Like we have students that grew up worse than you or I did, and it's like people are like, no, let's not give them more. Pull them up. Their parents should just get a job, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Work 3 jobs, or like they shouldn't have had children. You remember that? Like, you know, if you can't afford
to kill, yeah.
You know, if you can't afford children, why do you have 3? Mm-hmm. And it's like, but we're not going to pay for your health, your birth control. So just don't have sex. Like, no, that's not how that works. Like, human beings are not, you know, we are still in that aspect like every other animal. Our job is to produce. So it's like trying to explain that equity is literally, like, I thought it was a cool picture that you showed me where equity is not equality. Equity is like you go to a baseball game and you're watching through the fence, and because your dad can see over the fence and your older brother can see over the fence, but your little brother can't see. So we're going to give him 2, you know, levels so that he can see exactly what you're seeing. That's equity. So that doesn't mean like you don't need to give me, you know,
the same thing that
food stamps, because my family can afford to buy groceries. But that family that can't should get
in that moment.
They need assistance.
So there was another comic strip I saw that it was 2 houses.
Yeah.
And one house was on fire, and the guy in the other house is like I want water on my house too. Why is he getting water sprayed on my house? Yeah. And it's, you know, in that person's time of need, you know, they you know, or a kid, you know, a kid needs a bit more help than, you know, there's some kids that, you know, they got it all, you know, they're impressive, and it's like, you know, they're pretty much set. They know what they're going to do with their life, and they got both parents at home.
They're just good at school. Like I always say, there's just certain people that are good at school. Yeah. You don't need me. Like, I could be the best teacher in the world. You can be the best teacher in the world.
You know what?
They can have the worst teacher. They're still going to be.
They're going to learn despite you.
Yeah.
And then there's other kids that they just really need that support.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, thinking back to high school, sitting next to one of my best friends, Isaiah, and his brother and I both trying to cheat off of him, and he's like, if you don't do it for yourself, you'll never learn. But he just, like, our teacher, he would just, you know, put the you know, equations up on the board, and he's like, it's real easy. See, look how I'm doing it.
And you're like,
and then he would erase it. All right, now I want you guys to do it. And Isaiah's would be like, all right, that was easy. Yeah, I got it. And he'd get it down, and Ray and I looking at each other, it's like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah, it's like somebody speaking a different language.
Yeah, and it did. Yeah. And then, you know, you start to, you know, I hate math. I hate this teacher. You know, I'm not good at math. But I remember going to another math teacher, Mr. Horowitz, and he you know, and he took the time to break things down for me, and he just taught things a little differently. And you know, I'm sure my other teacher, Mr. Hassan, you know, brilliant guy, but just I wasn't getting his teaching style. And Mr. Horowitz, he's like, all right, I see your problem. And he went back, taught us the basics little by little. And, you know, he took that time to teach things the way we needed it taught.
And see, that's something I think is unfortunate about our teaching profession, is that, like, you know, we always talk, when we were working together, we would always talk about it. I always be fascinated with how you could break things down. And you'd be like, oh, this is great. You do that. And I'm like, yeah, but you do it better. You're like, no, I like the way you do it. I'm like, no, but I like the way you do it. Because, like, I'm like, no, but kids also need, like, I'm bad at breaking things down to a level. I could teach you from here to here, but I have to work on this part. You're very good at both aspects. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to use that. But then I'm like, what do you want them to get out of this? Because I need to see it. And it's like, so when kids are like, Mr. P, you're a great social studies teacher. I'm like, oh, but you know who's better?
But I think we're our harshest critic. You know? So like Kevin Quinn, he always tells kids, you see Mr. Cardona here, you know, you guys are lucky you have him. You don't have me. But, you know, I like, once again, going to Mr. Quinn's class and seeing his lessons and being like, you know, wow, you know, I got to steal that. And, you know, we compliment each other, you know. And I think, you know, when you were on our team also, you know, I was excited to have you on our team, because I'm like, all right, you know, I've been picking Kevin's brain for years now. I'm going to pick, you know, Brian's brain.
And I think but it's cool because you realize his perspective, right? And you realize that all our kids actually need all of us combined, because it's like, what they get out of you is great, but imagine combining that with Quinn, and then, you know, with me and then all of a sudden you're getting that. And I think as you know, a teaching profession, that's equity too, right? Because it's like, I could sit in my room for the next 20 years and teach, But if I don't see you teach, or I don't talk to you about the lessons, or I don't collaborate with